Hello and welcome. You're watching QTV and you are watching the Week in Review. I'm your host Diagne, and here, friend and colleague to co-host Mbaye. And if you watch the show, it's the usual welcome, Mr. Mbaye. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Ade. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And for viewers old and new, this is the slimmed down Ramadan version of this program, which means instead of 10 stories from the week, we only have 5. But of course, we try and make them 5 cracking ones. Believe me? Good. Well, this week we've got 2 stories from Senegal, one to do with the election and how the election observers have seen it, but we'll delve into other stuff, of course. And then Macky Sall performing one of his last public duties as president of Senegal. And then the National Assembly has adopted a report, an unusual one, because it came from a petition filed by people who worked for the Gambia Tourism Board. And then the OIC Gambia Secretariat, they're preparing the media to give decent coverage of the upcoming summit. What do you mean, which summit? You know the one, 4th and 5th of May. And then finally, big story, UN Security Council. Is it doing the job it was set up to do? These are the 5 stories on this week's edition of the Week in Review. So let's get cracking. If you live in this area, this part of the world, you know that Senegal recently had elections, and if you don't live in this part of the world, I won't spoil it for you as to who won. Anyway, have a look, have a listen.
Last Sunday, the voters of Senegal went to the polls to vote for their 5th president, the result of which saw 44-year-old Bassirou Diomaye Faye, the opposition candidate, elected with over 50% of the vote. To ensure the polls were free, fair, transparent and credible, many organizations, including ECOWAS, sent delegations to observe the election. In the ECOWAS delegation was Gambian-born Mrs. Diagne, the Director of Administration and Finance of the ECOWAS Parliament, representing the Community Parliament. During a post-election briefing by the ECOWAS Observer Mission, headed by Professor Ibrahim Gambri and Ambassador Abdul Fattah Musa, Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security, Diagne hailed ECOWAS for its prominent roles in the areas of parliamentary diplomacy and mediation in the sub-region.
We heard our colleague Ali Cisse there, Mr. Mbaye. It's come and it's gone, and there was no runoff. And a friend of mine posted, a BBC colleague and friend, posted a video saying the country in Africa that has not had a coup, and which about 100 people have sent in, at least 10 countries in Africa that have never had a coup. And they say, you know, BBC, you should be ashamed of yourself. But that aside, that was about ECOWAS observers saying it was peaceful and pretty much free of violence. There was one minor incident.
That's it, but some of us were not surprised, really, because once they had decided that it was going to be held on 24th of March, and then with the amnesty law,
right.
So all the fuel, the potential fuel for any violence was really snuffed out, taken out. So really not surprised that in the end, it was a peaceful elections. You just said it was a peaceful elections that led to what you call an earthquake.
Indeed. Youngest Senegalese president, youngest elected president in Africa ever, at 44. But to you and I and many observers around the world, because as I've said when we had a program about this, I went online and all of them had predicted a runoff. And yesterday I listened to Senegalese analysts from within Senegal interviewed, I think on BBC, and they also said that they thought it was going to be a runoff. Wasn't even close to that.
Absolutely. And then it makes you wonder, why did they think that? What were they relying on?
Well, one of them, a female analyst that they spoke to, said that you know, having gauged the popularity, they both had support from across the board. Effectively, they were both coalition candidates, really, even though effectively, you know, they were, you know, in the case of Ba, he was standing as a single candidate, you know, not a, but essentially she said there were lots of these coalitions, and you imagine that they would kind of tip the balance to such an extent that it would be very hard to split them. And she said, you know, she was admitting that that's why I was giving you that.
Absolutely.
That's just one.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But again, one would come back and say, but in the absence of polls, how really do I gauge objectively what is going on out there?
Sure.
Because I have to say this though, there was one site I went to and these people organization said that they had conducted a poll and had given Jomai 71%.
I saw that.
You saw that one?
I saw that.
I thought that was wild. But in the end, it seems he was nearer. Because there was no runoff, really. That was it. He was nearer to the mood, to what was going on in Senegal, than the so-called pundits.
That's right. And I'm glad you mentioned it, because one of my colleagues, I won't name the colleague, had said that, I wouldn't give the gender, but they thought that was the actual result. And I said, no. And of course, the result was only declared late on Friday, as officially declared late on Friday, although when they were declaring it, they said these are the same results that we declared on Wednesday, because by Wednesday, all 100% of polling stations had been accounted for. And so he got 54% of the vote, and Amadou Ba got 35.79, something like that. And so a change of guard in many respects. And we've seen him go to the palace with Sonko to meet Macky Sall, and there was all smiles and hugs. So, you know, again, as you said, it's what we expect from Senegal.
Absolutely. And with Diomaye Faye, the rhetoric has been quite lofty in many ways. The sort of so-called ruptures that they want to enact.
That's right.
Now that will be it's a radical agenda in many ways.
Yeah.
It's a crucial test. It's an interesting test. I mean, Senegal has been setting examples, especially in West Africa. Let's just narrow it down to that.
Right, you know, exactly.
I think the only competition will be perhaps Cape Verde. So that's it. So they've been setting examples in all sorts of ways.
Sure.
Here, they've effected a radical change without the barrel of the gun, as we said earlier, through the ballot box. And upending the old order that we thought that was just so entrenched would be difficult to upend. Yet
that's
they
something
did.
he mentioned.
He
mentioned in his speech, one of the speeches he gave at a press conference. He said, "This is, shunting out the old order, and this is a new Senegal." And then he went on to say, we will deal respectfully with countries that deal respectfully with us. And some people say, oh, he means France, but he means everybody, really.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So that's really massive.
Yeah, sure.
But, for a long time, with the experience that we've had post-independence, we thought that wouldn't. But there is this particular experiment here showing everybody, actually, it can be done.
Thank you. We could go on, but we mustn't. But thank you for that, Mr. Mbaye. I have to keep reminding myself we only have 5 stories, and we only have half an hour. And so the next story, again, we stay in Senegal, and President Macky Sall performed one of his last public duties, and that was to unveil a statue. A statue to whom, I hear you ask? Hey, have a look, have a listen. According to the testimony of many survivors, the late peacekeeper confronted the Interahamwe attackers and told them it was his duty to protect these men and women, and they could kill him before they could kill the Tutsi. It is believed that Diagne may have saved between 600 and 1,000 people before he was killed on May the 31st, 1994, in a mortar attack at a militia checkpoint. In many parts of the world, and especially in Rwanda, Diagne's heroism has not gone unrecognized. In 2010, he was awarded the Umurinzi, the Campaign Against Genocide Medal, which was presented to his widow Yacine Mar Diop by President Paul Kagame. And in 2019, at the 25th Kwibuka, the annual remembrance of the end of the genocide, President Kagame mentioned him by name as being among the non-Rwandans who had given their lives to save many Rwandans. And before we delve into the story, we don't normally give shout-outs, but a shout-out to my friend Vincent Gassana in Rwanda, who is Rwandan, who at first alerted me to Diagne some years ago, and it just coincidentally happened that the statue to Diagne was, as I said, one of Macky Sall's final acts as public acts as president, but Mr. Mbaye, an inspirational and inspiring figure, Diagne.
Extraordinary. I couldn't believe it when I saw the story in some of the papers. Was it the Times?
That's right.
The Rwandan Times and stuff.
That's right, Rwandan Times.
And I thought, extraordinary. You know, some of us, we remember 1994, the genocide.
We remember people like Romeo Dallaire and people like that, but Diagne less so.
That's it.
Yeah.
But this is it. This is what I was going to come to. With Dallaire was following the regulations, what you should do, what you shouldn't do, what you can do, what you can't do. Afterwards, he ruled that. He regretted that. Diagne was the other kind of figure. He disregarded all of that.
That's right. And he took literally his duty to protect.
Absolutely. So he just disregarded that because he felt that that was the right thing to do.
Indeed, in the circumstances.
In the circumstances.
Yeah.
So he flouted all sorts of things, and in the end, the figures we've got, he saved what, between 600 and 1,000 people really. Yes. And risking his life, and in the end, he died in the battleground. What an extraordinary human being.
It really is. And Mark Doyle, whom I know, a BBC guy, wrote a beautiful piece, Good Man in Rwanda, which again dealt with the fact that Diagne saved Doyle's life by making light of the fact that they were going to kill him because they felt he was Belgian, and they were killing lots of Belgians, and this was just 10 days after 10 Belgian peacekeepers had been killed. And Diagne said to them, no, I'm the Belgian, I'm a black Belgian. And they kind of laughed, and then he explained to them that, no, actually, he's British. Let him go. And Doyle wrote about that, wrote very movingly, and he said, I owe my life to that man. So, you know, not even just the ones where he stood in, but he used humor as well to actually, calm situations. And it's just a pity, in the tragedy, really, the way in which he was killed.
Absolutely. And if people really get the context, because the Rwandese ambassador in Senegal said that while the others were abandoning us once the massacre started, it was absolutely gruesome. Yeah, so a lot of people left. Said, well, Diagne and the Senegalese contingent remained. And so that is just unbelievable.
It really is.
The inspiration is...
Well, this is it. And some of Diagne's comrades, including a former general who said he was his classmate, also gave testimony. And they said, as well as, yes, he was this heroic figure, but he was a warm person. He was somebody who was full of humor. And they gave glowing testimony to him. But the thing that you and I discussed was that around the office, almost nobody had heard of him. Absolutely. And he ought to be better known. And that was one of the reasons why I did the story, I have to be honest.
Absolutely. And bravo to Senegal for erecting this statue. Perhaps if they hadn't done it, we wouldn't have come to life.
And what would make people remember the statue is, of course, again, the fact that Macky Sall's last public duty, but also the fact that there is this statue, then people can go. And of course, his family, his widow and his children are there, and they were there as well. So,
yes, the international recognition, certainly we have to say it. To some extent is there because there's a Captain Diagne medal with the UN. So this is it. For us, it's just been a revelation.
It really has.
But what an inspirational story to everybody, really.
Very much so. So please, people, go online, check out Captain Diagne and his story. It probably make you weep. It made me very emotional. And there's one video to avoid. It's a gruesome video of the moment they found his body dead at the wheel of the car where he was killed. But that's on YouTube, and it's shared by the UN. I was quite surprised that they shared that. But thank you for that, Mr. Mbaye. And now back home here in the Gambia, the National Assembly had some very interesting exchanges the other day when they adopted the report on alleged corruption at the GT board. What's that all about, I hear you ask? Here's to tell you more. Have a listen.
Tabling the committee's resolutions for adoption, the Vice Chair of the Public Petitions Committee, nominated member Honorable Fatoumatta Jawara, shared details of their findings. Among other things, she highlights the committee's findings, which she says to a large extent corroborates many of the allegations in the petition.
The Finance and Public Account Committee, FPAC, must further investigate who gave the authority to build a hotel at Bara, was eventually abandoned, costing millions, and report back to the National Assembly on or before the 1st of September 2024.
In their interventions, members for Kiang West, Janjanbureh and Brikama North, Honorable Lamin Sise, Omar Jame and Alaji S. Dabo, respectively, called on the public to formally report any evidence of corruption or abuse of office to Parliament, adding that corruption is a cause resulting in enormous loss to the state and erodes trust in public institutions.
Calling on the public to report we've always bemoaned the fact that the Gambia doesn't have an anti-corruption commission. But Mr. Mbaye, I was quite surprised and in a way pleased that there is such a setup where they can petition in the way that they did. It gets investigated, and the report was scathing. I mean, if people haven't read it, they need to go online, download it, and read it. And in some cases, they'll be quite shocked. But the fact is, it was a serious report, and it found serious errors of what had gone on at the GT board. They didn't hold back.
Absolutely, and then you begin to think that, wow, here heads must roll.
That's what one might think.
That's what one might think. So what next?
Yeah,
I think some of us are not really surprised.
Yeah,
Let's be honest with ourselves. We've been reading audit reports and so many different reports.
Audit reports, we've seen commissions of inquiry,
and
they've all been revealing things of a similar nature.
Absolutely. Yeah. So these managerial lapses, massive, huge lapses at the very heart of administration.
Well, this is it. People being hired without proper procedure being followed. People being sacked without proper procedure being followed. Projects being implemented without proper procedure. It just reeks of failure to follow the rules.
That's it. So that's the scale of the problem we're going to deal with here. Sure. So we'll deal with them one step at a time. Sure. Just as here what the committee, their findings, on the basis of their findings, then we'll see what next. But that is really the heart of the matter, organizationally. Otherwise, Eddie, we all know your programs will never really then give you the outcomes that you want, because organizationally that is the very mechanism, isn't it, that turns sort of words into action and outcomes. So one must be very, very careful.
And one of the reasons why I chose to end the report there, the clip there where it ended, is where it is calling on the public to say, report these things. So the public might say, oh yeah, we've seen the report of the committee, but what they want to see is what happens next, what action takes place. Because until that happens, they will say, well, you remember what happened with GT board? They reported them, the committee investigated, they did the report to the National Assembly, nothing happened, no heads rolled. So unless that happens, then it won't give confidence to the public to actually report similar.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think sort of to encourage compliance, there are certain conditions. And really, first you're clear about what the rules are, and then you're clear about the penalties and the enforcement and the whole architecture, if you like, of things in place. So when one link is not working, then the whole chain, see how it affects the whole chain. So we have to wake up to this reality, really, and if we are serious, then it doesn't take a genius, really. For us, the problem has been will, not knowledge of what to do or what to do, really. It's just been the will.
So in closing this particular one, before we go to the next story, for you, does this push more the need for an anti-corruption commission, similar to the one they have in Sierra Leone, which can both investigate and prosecute? So it takes it out of the hands of the Assembly. Because the Assembly, they've done their report, and now they have to send it forward yet again. Whilst if you had an anti-corruption commission, it could do both. It could investigate, and it could issue charges and prosecute.
That's it, and I think there's a clause for that in the anti-corruption bill that we haven't passed yet. So absolutely, I'm not really sure though the remit of this anti-corruption commission, whether they'll be allowed to prosecute and the like. I'm not sure what is in the bill. It will be interesting to know. But this is said, we need to have the right institutions and be serious about what we do. You see, we were just talking about the elections. Senegal only gloried itself because the institutions worked.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Well, this is
Macky pushed in all directions, but then in the Constitutional Council, the institutions worked. So this is what makes a great nation. We must give some of these institutions the requisite autonomy so that you can do your job efficiently. That's when the country will benefit. When we play politics with certain things, well, in the end, it wouldn't serve you. You will regret them in the end. We will regret
them. And if any Sierra Leonean is watching this, they're probably ringing in their ears is the name Laura Taylor Pierce. She was our Auditor General. she issued a report which was quite scathing of the still president and his cohorts. He sacked her and threatened to prosecute her. 3 years later, not a single charge has been leveled against her, but she still remains dismissed. So that's what we need to avoid. Thank you for that, Mr. Stonebridge. And now, back still in the Gambia, the OIC Gambia Secretariat. They're the ones running the show in terms of getting us ready for the upcoming summit of heads of state and rulers, which will take place on the 4th and 5th of May. And recently, they called on the media to come and brief them of what the do's and don'ts are of covering such a summit. Have a look.
So I usually also tell people that it is one of the single biggest PR opportunities for us. It's a make or break moment for us. So it is up to us as a people to see and determine how we want to handle or approach this issue. There are two ways to it. It's either we take advantage of it, make the best use of it, or squander the opportunity.
Either we make the best use of it or we squander the opportunity. Fali Fadera there, who's the head of brands and communications at the Secretariat. Mr. Mbaye, this is part of a kind of sensitization, saying to people, look, when these people come, you are ambassadors of the Gambia as much as anything else. And we're not saying, you know, you just have to say nice things, but at least know what it is you can and can't say, and what you can and cannot cover, and what you might expect to be able to cover. It's only 2 days. So yeah, I mean, and I hold my hand up. I'm part of the media subcommittee, so I was involved. I gave 2 of the training sessions at that event that they've just seen. But this is getting the media on board, and because we've never covered anything of this magnitude in the Gambia, and that's why we're doing it.
That was exactly my thought. That was what I was going to say first. You've never really hosted anything this big.
Yeah,
so really, everybody needs help.
This is it. Yeah.
You know, including state agencies. We all need help. What do we do?
Yeah,
so it was a fantastic preparatory move, as it were, to get them tuned into this.
Well, this is it. Yes, and what I did before my presentation, this is not to bore anybody, but I showed 2 videos, one from the 1969 summit, which was the first ever, and one from the 1974 summit, which was the first ever attended by Sadauda. And there's you can just see him in the clip there next to, I think, the then Cameroon president, as they both arrived at the airport at about the same time. And then I did a kind of mock press conference to show them what it is. So they know what to expect. They don't arrive, come the summit, expecting something, and then think, oh, that's not what we were saying. So that's, as you say, it's a preparatory thing, and we want people to get prepared and know, you know, what the do's and don'ts are, and obviously what they can and cannot expect.
Absolutely. And how to ask questions.
In my bid, I said, you know, if you're the ruler of Saudi Arabia, you know, is your His Majesty, or if it's you know, President, is, you know, Your Excellency, or if it's somebody Honorable Minister. You know, just there are certain rules and decorums. And I said to them, and this was what I said, coming to the Gambia, where they know that they're Muslims and Christians, if you're a Muslim and you get up and you just start your question, they'll say, oh, I thought this was a majority Muslim country. If you start with Salaam Alaikum before, they would expect that. If you're not a Muslim, they won't expect that from you. So, and there's also dress code. So we covered all these things, but, you know, and I said, don't turn up like you've just walked up the beach. I'm sure people won't, but, you know, dress, because you don't know who you might get lucky enough to interview. And if you look like rubbish, then, you know, it's not going to be a good look.
Because in many ways, it is their event as well. You see, every diplomatic event, you know, on the face of it is a diplomatic event, but it is equally a media event.
This is it. And every media person is a diplomat for the Gambia. And so I started my presentation by asking who's here from the print, radio, online, and TV. I just wanted to get a sense and a feel, and there was a kind of fairly even balance, which was good to see. We had about 56 or so, possibly more people attend, and we could have had more, but, you know, can't have more. But of course, closer to the time, we hope to have others when we know exactly what the kind of media access will be, because those were the big questions that came from the floor. Really.
Exactly, and I hope that they'll sort of also do their homework, read up on past summits you should have
been
the potential guests, a bit of biography, what they had said in the past, what they had done.
Yeah.
That background helps you to sharpen questions.
Totally what I said. I told them research the summits, research the people that you might want to question. And part of why you might need to research the summits is you might be surprised at some of the themes and the communiques that have come at the end of the summit. For example, the 1981 summit ended with the first line saying they're encouraging all Muslim nations to wage jihad against Israel. Of course, that never happened. And then in 1984, they sanctioned Iran for saying they were fiddling and interfering in other countries. So sometimes they're quite hard, but this time it's about unity through dialogue and sustainable development. So very much things. And I said to them, when you're asking their questions, make sure that it's within the theme. So go back, research the theme, and decide why they chose that theme. But yeah. Thank you for that. And yes, I'm definitely one of those looking forward to this summit. Thank you for that, Mr. Mbaye. And now to our final story. The United Nations Security Council. Is it doing the job for which it was set up? Well, you have your views. Many people have their views. Here's the Kenyan president with his view on it. Have a listen.
William Ruto, Kenya's president, is one of those unhappy about the current structure of the UN Security Council.
If any confirmation was ever needed that the United Nations Security Council is dysfunctional, undemocratic, non-inclusive, unrepresentative, and therefore incapable of delivering meaningful progress in our world as presently constituted,
the status quo presents a major stumbling block in the UN's mandate to address humanitarian crises such as violent conflicts, arms proliferation, terrorism, and climate change-related disasters.
UN Security Council, I always feel sorry for them. They have an impossible job, don't they, Mr. Mbaye? And in case anybody's wondering, this is a trick question that you ask people who were the founders of the Security Council that were permanent members, who were the five. And people would always say Russia. Well, strictly speaking, not. It was the Soviet Union, but it's a trick question, as I said. The others are France, Britain, United States of America, China. Look, Mbaye, our colleague Troy is arguing that it's not fit for purpose because we have this veto power that's been devolved to these five Security Council members. What's your view on that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, writers have been writing about this for a while now. Yeah. The post-45 settlement is creaking. It's been creaking at the seams, as it were. It has come to its sell-by date.
Really, yeah.
A new world has evolved that would require a different arrangement as it were, to really deal with the kind of issues that we're facing right now, climate change and all sorts of things. Sure. So that's really change must happen. And everybody's been saying it, including the current Secretary General.
Well, this is it. And of course, the thing that is hampering change is that as it is set up, it's said that for there to be the kind of revolutionary change that we're talking about, the five who people want to replace or at least added to have to consent. Effectively, they can veto whether there is any change or not, which is the very thing that people are complaining about. Why have they got so much right when the world has changed, as you rightly said?
Absolutely.
Since those days.
But still, what remains is the notion of power.
Yeah,
things are changing in all sorts of ways, but power is just power. So this is really the problem we have, because, well, the big five, really, they were the winners. Second World War.
That's right.
Essentially, that's what it is. And brought in China because of the recognized the significance of China, of course. And that is it. But so their own politics determines for the world. All it's got implications, consequences on everybody else. It's extraordinary. And they've gotten into this sort of automatic relationship. When the US brings in something, you know there's going to be vetoed by China and Russia.
As we heard recently, just last week, to do with the Israel-Gaza war.
Absolutely.
The US were patting themselves on the back that they were bringing a ceasefire, but China and Russia said, actually, we don't like the terms of this ceasefire now that we've delved into it, and they vetoed it and killed it.
In an emergency, it's a woeful institution. It's absolutely useless in an emergency.
Well, really,
and that's a huge, massive problem. There are all sorts of problems, but how do we effect any kind of change? Having to deal with the fact of power. I really have no answers.
Yes, I don't think anybody has any answers, but kind of going forward, they've been sort of, among the suggestions has been the fact that even if you keep it at 5 with veto power, those 5 should rotate. It shouldn't be a permanent 5. What's your take on that? In 30 seconds.
That is true. The permanent 5 will tell you also what they spend. That's it. It's been running all these agencies. He who pays the piper determines the tune, calls the tune. So it's just going back to the same thing. The kind of egalitarian fairness, I've just never seen it in human history with human beings. So it's a matter of how do I deal with power, because I think that is a constant in human politics.
There you are, Mr. Mbaye. That's a nice point at which to draw a full stop. All it needs me to say is thank you very much for your interjection so far. And as ever to the viewers, thank you for watching until we come your way again, same time next week. Goodbye for now.